Black parliamentarians, meanwhile, and their allies are calling on all levels of government to take action against systemic racism in this country. In a signed statement from numerous MPs, senators, and cabinet ministers, they're asking for a series of measures like the collection of race-based data, reforms to policing and the justice system, and stronger support for Black-owned and operated businesses. The Prime Minister said he welcomed the calls this morning, but didn't commit specifically to any of them. For more on this call to action, I'm joined now by Greg Fergus, Liberal MP and Chair of the Black Parliamentary Caucus. He's in Ottawa. And Matthew Green is an NDP MP and member of the caucus. He joins us from Hamilton in Ontario. Hi to both of you. Great to see you. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you.
Mr. Fergus, I'm going to start with you. What is the genesis and why did you feel like it was necessary and important to put out this statement?
Well, look, this genesis of this started 5 years ago when the Parliamentary Black Caucus was first founded. Over that time, we've met with community leaders either across the country or when they've come to Ottawa for different meetings or meetings that we've organized. This is really community-based. And since the election, Matthew and I and other members of the Parliamentary Black Caucus and our allies have continued these meetings. When the brutal images of racism surfaced a couple of weeks ago, and all of us were reeling from the bigger messages of what that meant. We felt that it was time at one of our regular meetings of Black Caucus to write down and to really push for all the measures that we feel, the whole suite of measures which are needed to really make a good start in ending systemic discrimination and anti-Black racism.
There's a lot, Mr. Green, in here about a path forward, kind of like if what you've watched has made you realize there needs to be change, here are ways to enact that change. Why do you think spelling those measures out is important?
Well, I think to start off with, this letter is unprecedented in its historic context. Over 140 parliamentarians, senators, as you've identified, cabinet ministers have signed on to this call. This is a call for action. This is not a call for commissions or more studies or more consultations. This builds on community-based work from, Black Lives Matter movement, where we've seen protests from across the country demanding that there be action on the anti-Black and anti-Indigenous brutality that we are seeing play out online each and every day.
I saw you, Mr. Fergus, nodding your head as Mr. Green talked about how this is not, another study, another call to have another study. This is a call to action. Why is that important to you two?
Well, because for the last, for many years, there have been many opportunities for us to meet and to consult. That has led to action in the previous mandate. This is what led to that historic declaration of the existence of anti-Black racism, of adopting the decade of budgetary measures. But we knew that we have to do more. And we knew that the community has spelled it out. We weren't hearing anything that was new at this point. We know what the large suite of actions that we need to take to make a real difference. And when we saw, again, those brutal acts, it really drove home the point, not only to us, but I think to all Canadians, that enough is enough. Let us now move into action to avoid those excesses that we've seen elsewhere in the world.
Mr. Green, I wanted to get your perspective on some of the actions that are recommended, some of the recommendations put forth through this document. And first, I wanted to start on the collection of race-based data and the recommendation that the federal government lead that. Can you explain why that is so important to enact change going forward?
Well, in all areas of evidence-based decision-making and policy, it's important to have that data to find out how decisions impact various communities. And you take, for example, police brutality as it relates to the RCMP. Many have called for the immediate release of all the disaggregated data on the RCMP's incidents of use of force. We've seen that play out in horrific ways online. And in order for us to make very concerted policy adjustments on what it might look like to defund and to reallocate monies, to demilitarize police service and to revisit this conversation of public safety. It has to be done in an evidence-based way, and it's going to start with the disaggregated data where we can no longer hide behind what has been called the racial amnesia of this country.
Mr. Fergus, what's your perspective on how significant that data is? And I would add to, that's part of the discussion in COVID-19 right now, right? We have heard calls for that, led by the province, like the federal government saying the provinces should be doing that, the provinces asking the federal government to help out more on it. But certainly where that data is collected, we have seen a disproportionate effect, for example, of COVID-19 on marginalized communities, on minorities.
Yes, I mean, disaggregated data is a gift that will continue, the gift that will keep on giving. And the reason why I say that is because by being able to measure what the effects are, the differential effects are of different policies, well, we're able to then better allocate our resources into those areas to make real meaningful change and not spend it in areas where it's not effective. So that's why disaggregated data is so important. The second thing that we called for, because there's a suite of options, it's not just one thing, but there's a suite of options, are some economic measures to making sure that Black business people have the opportunity to create wealth, create prosperity, not only for themselves, but for all Canadians. We know that our communities, our business people have had faced systemic discrimination with financial institutions, either formally in the past or informally in more recent times. And certainly we're living with the consequences of that. So we got to make sure that we have those economic tools to make a real difference. And then, as Matthew pointed out, there's a whole number of things which we can do on the justice and public security side, which is also essential. And then, of course, how we can make sure that we have a real representation of Blacks to make our institutions look a lot like Canada at every level.
And those questions, some of them based on the statement that was issued, including, for example, on the justice system around mandatory minimums, those questions were put to the Prime Minister today. The question was basically, what are you prepared to act out of this statement? I want to play one of the Prime Minister's answers and then get both of you to weigh in. Let's listen to the Prime Minister on that.
I've said many times we are committed to moving forward on a huge range of measures. We're working with communities. We're working with leaders like members of the Parliamentary Black Caucus to identify what exactly we need to move forward first in priority on. But I think it's really important that we all come forward and look at bold ideas that we can take on very soon to fix the systemic discrimination that continues to exist in our country.
Mr. Green, let me start with you. I mean, at the end of the day, all of this is about the stuff that you guys are recommending actually being implemented. Given the statement just came out, that there was no specifics necessarily offered, but what is your initial impression of what you heard from the Prime Minister today?
Well, as I had mentioned, I just did an interview with Jody Wilson-Raybould, who signed on to this. Minister Lemeni has signed on to this. In making this declaration public, we are not only holding the government to account, we are asking the public to hold us to account. And so I would suggest that these are not a set of options. This is not a menu from which the government can pick and choose from. But I believe there needs to be concrete plans and a path forward to be able to implement these justice strategies in a very immediate way in response to what we're seeing in terms of inequality in this country.
Mr. Fergus, you're actually a member of the government, so you have that kind of unique ability to, I guess, push for those recommendations from within. What is your level of optimism? Have you had conversations with the Prime Minister about this statement that he and others in the federal government will act upon these recommendations?
Not only have I had conversations with the Prime Minister about this statement, but we've had many opportunities to discuss about actions which we really need to take to help the Black Canadians fulfill their full potential. Some of those things have led to actions in the past, and I'm confident that we are working on a suite of things which will be able to do exactly that in the future.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm out of time, but thank you very much to both of you for your time this evening. Thanks to Greg Fergus.
Thank you, and thank you to Greg's leadership as the chair. I do want to note that in a nonpartisan way, and Mr. Fergus has been exemplary.
I could say the same thing, Mr. Green, and all the members, certainly of Black Caucus and our allies. I think, Vashti, if I could just quickly say, it's remarkable to see how we've put all our partisan interests at the door, parked it at the door, and worked for Black Canadians. And it's been really impressive to see how many other of our colleagues in Parliament, from the Senate to the House, who are willing to stand with us at this time. I think things are changing.
Well, I have a feeling that a lot of Canadians watching will appreciate hearing that and seeing that. Thanks so much to both of you again. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Greg
Thank you.
Fergus and Matthew Green. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.